Bullied in high school. Now I'm married to my bully's dad. You won't believe why. Back in high school, my bully told me I'd die alone and be completely forgotten. So, in a twist no one saw coming, I went ahead and married his dad and became his stepmom. Ethan Caldwell turned my junior year into a daily nightmare. Every single day, he'd corner me by my locker with his group of sycophants, mocking me and calling me freak girl, just because I preferred reading a book during lunch instead of gossiping about boys. But before I dive into all that, let me say this. I've noticed the channel's been slowing down a bit lately. If you're here and you like these stories, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to show support. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps keep this community growing strong. He'd smack the books out of my hands, stick his foot out to trip me in the hallway, and crack loud, cruel jokes about whatever I was wearing whenever I passed his table. But the worst moment of all came during homecoming week. I was sitting alone in the cafeteria, head down, trying to wrap up my chemistry homework, when Ethan suddenly jumped onto his chair. The room fell completely silent. Every eye turned toward me as he pointed directly in my direction and shouted, "Check out Emily Chin." Once again, eating alone and doing homework like the hopeless little loser she is. Then, just to twist the knife, he added, "I bet she's so bizarre she'll end up dying alone in a tiny apartment filled with cats." The whole cafeteria lost it. Everyone laughed. Even the teachers acted like they hadn't heard a thing. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as a few kids stared. Some started meowing, and others whispered while pointing. I quickly grabbed my stuff and bolted to the bathroom, where I stayed hidden until the final bell rang. That night, I cried into my pillow so hard that my eyes swelled shut. But something inside me changed. Instead of completely breaking, I got mad, furious, actually. I started working out like my life depended on it, doubled down on my studies, and began plotting my escape from that narrow-minded little town where jerks like Ethan Caldwell were somehow considered popular. Fast forward 10 years, and I was living in Chicago, thriving as a marketing director. I'd built a life Ethan couldn't even dream of, jet-setting for work, owning a sleek downtown condo with skyline views, and dating people who actually valued my brain. Honestly, I hadn't thought about Ethan or his nasty little prophecy in years, until I literally bumped into his dad at a coffee shop. Michael Caldwell was nothing like his son. At 52, he was refined, warm, and genuinely curious about what I had to say. When the lid on my latte popped off and spilled all over his newspaper, he laughed softly and insisted on buying me another drink. "I'm Michael," he said, offering his hand with a kind smile. "Emily," I replied, still not connecting the dots. We ended up talking for 2 straight hours about books, travel, architecture, life, philosophy, you name it. He was recently divorced, worked as an architect, and had this calm, thoughtful way of listening that made me feel truly seen. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. Michael was everything I admired, worldly, emotionally mature, and sharp-witted in that dry, intellectual way that reminded me of my favorite professors. Basically, the total opposite of his son. Midway through dessert, curiosity got the better of me. "Can I ask, do you have any kids?" His face fell just a little. "One son," he said. "We're not very close. He's had his struggles over the years." I gave a sympathetic nod, still completely unaware of the connection. 6 months later, Michael got down on one knee with a vintage Art Deco ring, exactly the kind I would have picked myself. I didn't even think twice. I said yes on the spot, feeling like I was living in a dream. We decided on an intimate ceremony at his home, a stunning old Victorian he'd personally restored with incredible craftsmanship. On the morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready in front of his antique mirror, Michael casually mentioned something that made my heart stop. "Ethan's been asking to meet you," he said while adjusting his tie. I thought today might be a good time. My blood turned cold. I hadn't thought about the name Ethan Caldwell in months, but hearing it on my wedding day hit me like a punch to the gut. I sank onto the antique vanity chair, staring blankly at my reflection in the white dress. "Emily, are you okay?" Michael asked, his voice laced with concern. I turned to face him, this sweet, gentle man who had no idea what kind of torment his son had once put me through. "Michael," I asked quietly, "what's Ethan's middle name?" He paused. "James. Ethan James Caldwell." "Why?" I asked, my mind suddenly flashing back to our high school yearbook. Ethan J. Caldwell, voted class clown, most likely to peak in high school. The same guy who had slowly chipped away at my self-worth for 2 straight years. But I just shook my head and lied. No reason, just curious. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Honestly, it felt like something out of a dream. Michael's eyes welled up when he saw me walking down the aisle we'd created right there in his living room. Our closest friends and family sat watching as we exchanged vows in front of the fireplace he'd built with his own 2 hands. When he kissed me, I genuinely felt like the luckiest woman alive. At least, until the front door creaked open right in the middle of our first dance. There he was, Ethan Caldwell, looking exactly how I remembered him, just a little more worn around the edges. His eyes swept the room, landing squarely on me. Still in Michael's arms, I watched as the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Then came the shock. "Dad, Ethan's voice cracked like ice underfoot. What the hell is this? Michael let go of me gently and turned to face his son. You made it, he said, trying to keep the moment light. I want you to meet my wife, Emily. Ethan's mouth dropped open. He just stood there, frozen, like he'd seen a ghost. Emily Chun. His voice barely came out. Now Caldwell. I extended my hand with a smile sharp enough to slice through steel. Nice to see you again, Ethan. The room went silent. Everyone could feel the tension, though no one understood it. Michael glanced between us, visibly puzzled. Wait, you two know each other? I gave a smooth little nod. We went to the same high school, ran in different circles. You know how small towns are. Ethan looked like he might pass out. Dad, he said under his breath. Can we talk? Just the two of us, after the reception? Michael didn't budge. This is our wedding day, son. For the next 3 hours, I watched Ethan squirm like he was stuck in a bear trap. He tried his best to steer clear of me, but no matter where he went, I seemed to be one step ahead. He went to get a drink. I was already at the bar. Stepped out back for air. I followed. This is insane, he muttered when we finally found ourselves alone on the patio. You married my dad? I married a kind, intelligent, wonderful man, who just happens to be your father, I replied calmly. Though I have to admit, the apple must have rolled pretty far from the tree. He ran both hands through his hair like he was trying to pull the situation out by the roots. Emily, look. About high school. Yeah. I cut him off, voice steady. About how you made my life hell? About the way you turned everyone against me? About the time you stood on a chair and told the entire cafeteria I'd die alone and forgotten? He flinched hard. I was a kid. I was an idiot. You were more than that. You were cruel, I said flatly. But don't worry. I'm not here to get even. I'm here because I love your father. The fact that this situation makes you squirm? Just icing on the cake. He stared at me, stunned. He doesn't know, does he? Ethan asked quietly. About what I did to you? No, I said. And I'm not going to tell him either. He loves you, despite your flaws. I'm not about to ruin that for him. But understand something. I stepped in closer. I'm not that scared 16-year-old girl you used to mock. I'm your stepmother now, and you will show me the respect that role deserves. Every drop of color drained from his face. When we came back inside, Ethan mumbled some excuse and left not long after. Michael was disappointed, but not shocked. He'll come around, he said as he pulled me into his arms. He just needs a little time to adjust. In the months that followed, Ethan kept his distance. Michael called him often, but Ethan always had an excuse. Work was crazy. He wasn't feeling well. His car was in the shop again. I just don't know what's going on with him, Michael said one night over dinner, clearly worried. Ever since the wedding, he's been so distant. I reached across the table and wrapped my fingers around his. Maybe he just needs space to sort things out. It can't be easy seeing your dad with someone new. Michael gave my hand a gentle squeeze. You're probably right. I really think you two would get along if he gave you half a chance. If only he knew. Thanksgiving rolled around, the first big holiday since the wedding, and Michael insisted Ethan come. For once, Ethan ran out of excuses. When he arrived, he looked like he was walking into a courtroom, not a family dinner. Throughout the meal, he was civil, tense, but civil. He said my name instead of avoiding it, gave polite responses when I asked him questions, and even helped clear the dishes after we ate. But I could see how hard he was trying. After dinner, while Michael was in the kitchen loading up the dishwasher, Ethan cornered me in the dining room. He kept his voice low, but his words were sharp with frustration. This is so messed up, he muttered. Every time I see you, all I can think about is what a complete piece of shit I was in high school. Good, I said, not missing a beat as I kept stacking plates. You should think about that. Emily, please. He looked down at the floor for a second. I know I don't deserve it, but can we just start over? For my dad's sake. I paused. Really looked at him. He was 32 now. A far cry from the cocky teenager who used to hold court in the hallways like he owned the place. Life had chipped away at the armor. Michael had told me bits and pieces. Ethan worked as a mechanic, lived in a modest apartment, and wrestled with depression and anxiety. The sharp edges were duller now, replaced by something that almost looked like remorse. I don't need an apology, Ethan, I said finally. I don't need closure or a heart-to-heart or some redemption arc. What I do need is for you to be a good son to your father. Because he loves you more than you probably realize or deserve. His eyes filled up with tears. I know he does. And I know I've been letting him down. Then stop, I said simply. Stop making this about you and me. Make it about him. And just like that, something shifted. Ethan started showing up. He called Michael more. He actually came to family dinners. Around Christmas, he brought his girlfriend, Olivia, a kind-hearted elementary school teacher who clearly adored him. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A beginning. But the real test came 6 months later when Michael had a mild heart attack. I was at the hospital within minutes of getting the call. Still in my work clothes, heart pounding, trying to get a hold of Ethan. When he finally rushed in, his face was pale, eyes bloodshot with panic. How is he? He asked, voice shaking. Stable, I said. It was mild. The doctors want to keep him overnight, just to be safe. We sat together in the waiting room for hours. Ethan kept whispering apologies about not getting there sooner, about not being a better son, about not calling more often. Eventually, I turned to him and said, "You need to shut up." He blinked. "Your father knows you love him," I said. "That's what matters. Right now, that's all that matters." When Michael was finally awake and they let us visit, Ethan broke down, right there by his bedside. He told his dad everything, how sorry he was for being distant, how much he loved him, how thankful he was to still have him in his life. No bravado, no pride, just raw honesty. Later, as he was leaving, he stopped next to my chair. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet. "For what?" I asked. "For making him happy. For being there when he needed someone. He swallowed, trying to find the words. For being better than I ever was." 2 years into our marriage, Ethan and Olivia got engaged. At their engagement party, he stood up with a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady. "But more than anything, I want to thank my dad for showing me what love looks like, and Emily for showing me what grace looks like." He lifted his glass and looked right at me. "Emily, when we were younger, I said some awful things to you. Things I regret every single day. You could have held on to that anger. You could have made this family a battlefield. But you didn't. You chose kindness. You chose to love my dad. And in doing that, you somehow chose to love me, too. Even when I didn't deserve it." The room was still. Michael looked confused, but I could see the pride in his eyes. I felt my throat tighten, tears stinging my eyes. "To second chances," Ethan said, raising his glass, "and to the people who give them to us." Everyone drank, but I barely tasted the champagne. After the party, Michael pulled me aside. "What was Ethan talking about?" he asked. "About saying terrible things to you?" I hesitated. For a second, I thought about brushing it off. Thought about keeping the lid on that part of the past forever. But Michael deserved more than that. He deserved the truth. "High school wasn't easy for me," I said carefully. "Ethan was part of a crowd that made it harder. But people grow. They change. And the man who toasted me tonight? He's not the boy who made my life miserable 15 years ago." Michael's face darkened. "He bullied you. My son bullied you. He was a teenager," I said quickly. "A hurt, confused teenager who needed help he probably wasn't getting." I looked him in the eye. "But look at him now. Look at the man he's trying to be. That's what matters." Michael didn't say anything for a long while. "Did you know who he was when we met?" he asked eventually. "No," I said. "I had no idea you were his father. Not until the wedding." "And you stayed anyway?" I took his hand. "Michael," I said softly, "I fell in love with you. Not despite your son, but including him. Ethan's a part of who you are. And I chose all of you." 3 months later, he asked if we could grab lunch, just the two of us. No Michael. No Olivia. Just him and me. We ended up at the same little coffee shop where Michael and I had our first date. That felt fitting, somehow. Ethan stepped up and ordered for both of us, and I blinked when I heard him say, "1 milk latte, please." He still remembered. I hadn't ordered one in front of him in years. Once we sat down, he didn't waste time. "I need to tell you something." I gave him space. "I've been going to therapy," he said. "That's great, Ethan. I've been talking about high school, about what I did to you, to other kids, and about why I did it." He stared down into his coffee like it held the answer. "My therapist says I was acting out because of my parents' divorce. I felt powerless. I was hurting. But..." He looked up at me. "That doesn't excuse it." "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't. I want to make amends," he said. "Real ones. Not just lip service. Not just to you, but to everyone I hurt." I studied his face. He wasn't bluffing. There was something different in his eyes, clarity. Focus. He looked like a man on a mission. "What does that look like?" I asked. "I've been reaching out to people from our class. Messaging them. Apologizing. Some won't respond, and I get that. I deserve that." He pulled out his phone and showed me a few message threads, names I hadn't thought about in years. People I remembered all too well from the hallways. Ethan had targeted them back then, too. Some replies were angry. Others forgiving. A few even apologized themselves for standing by, for saying nothing, for laughing along. "I saved you for last," he said. "Because what I did to you is the worst. And because you're family now." I was quiet. Just trying to take it all in. This wasn't some awkward, half-hearted apology to clear his conscience. This was him laying it all bare. "Ethan," I said finally, "I don't need your apology to move forward. I've already done that work." "I know," he said, "but I need to say it anyway." He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eyes. "Emily, I am profoundly sorry for what I did to you in high school. I was cruel. I was wrong. I caused you pain you didn't deserve. There's no excuse. And I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see who you are, the way you love my father, the way you hold this family together, the grace you've shown me. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. And I'm sorry for every single day I made you feel less than the amazing person you are." Tears hit my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. "Thank you," I whispered. We just sat there for a while, both of us a little overwhelmed. Then he asked, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. Do you think Dad would be proud of me? I mean, if you knew everything? The whole story. I thought about Michael, the man who always believed in people, who gave second chances like candy, who somehow raised a son while navigating his own heartbreak. I said carefully, that your father would be incredibly proud of the man you're becoming. Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying. Ethan smiled through watery eyes. I really love him, you know? And I really love that he found you. I love him too, I said. And Ethan? I'm proud of you. That night when I got home, Michael was in his workshop, putting the final touches on a new bookshelf for our bedroom. I told him everything about lunch, the therapy, the messages, the amends. He set his chisel down and exhaled. I had no idea he was struggling so much back then, he said. I was so wrapped up in the divorce and my own pain. I failed him. You didn't fail him, I said, firm and certain. You were in survival mode. And look at him now. He's facing it. He's doing the work. That's because of you. Michael pulled me into his arms. How did I get so lucky? He murmured. Ethan turns his life around, and I marry the most incredible woman I've ever met. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said, kissing his cheek. We chose each other. All of us. Last month, Ethan and Olivia got married, and he asked me to walk him down the aisle. His mom lived across the country, and they hadn't been close for years. Are you sure? I asked when he called. Absolutely, he said. You're the reason I believe in redemption. The reason I know people can change. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have by my side. On his wedding day, as we stood at the back of the church waiting for our cue, he turned to me. I still think about that day in the cafeteria sometimes, Ethan said quietly. About what I said to you. And I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd been kinder. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs, I said, reaching down to straighten his pant leg and adjust his boot. That road goes nowhere. I'm not, he replied with a small smile. I'm just grateful that despite everything, we ended up as family. And then the music started. We walked down the aisle together. Michael was waiting at the front, eyes glassy, smiling like his heart might burst, watching his son and his wife, me, walk toward the altar together. It was one of those moments that sticks to your soul. Later, at the reception, Michael and I danced to At Last by Etta James. He twirled me around the dance floor like we were floating. When I glanced toward the sweetheart table, I saw Ethan and Olivia laughing at something her tiny nephew had said, his mouth full of cake. Michael followed my gaze. What are you thinking about? Just how weird life is, I said. How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. Yeah, he asked. Like what? I looked up at him. The man who had handed me a future I never even thought to ask for. If Ethan hadn't been so awful to me back in high school, I don't know. I don't think I would have become me. Not this version, anyway. I don't think I would have been strong enough to build this life. And I definitely wouldn't have been sitting in that coffee shop the day you spilled my latte. Michael raised an eyebrow. So we owe our marriage to Ethan being a teenage jerk? In the weirdest way possible, I laughed. He dipped me low and kissed my cheek. Remind me to thank him in my father of the groom speech. Don't you dare, I said, but I was laughing too. That night, while we were getting ready for bed, Michael looked thoughtful, like something had been rolling around in his mind all day. Do you ever wonder, he said, what would have happened if you'd known who I was from the start? That Ethan was my son. I didn't even hesitate. Honestly, probably nothing would have happened. He looked surprised. Nothing. I nodded. I probably would have run the other way. And yet, here we were. I looked at this man who'd flipped my entire world upside down in the best way possible, who showed me what real, unconditional love looked like, who gave me a family that came with history and scars and redemption, a family I never knew I needed. The best things in life, I said, are usually the ones that scare the hell out of you. Today, 3 years after our wedding, Ethan calls me every Sunday without fail. Sometimes it's just about work or what he and Olivia are up to. Other times, it's about Michael. And every now and then, we talk about high school, not in a heavy way, but in a reflective one. We talk about how it shaped us, how it taught us what kindness really means, how it made us understand that words can wound, and sometimes they echo for decades, and how healing, true healing, starts when we stop running from who we were and start reaching for who we want to be. Ethan now speaks at local schools. He leads anti-bullying programs and tells his story to teenagers, not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that people can change, that they do. He doesn't lecture. Olivia told me over coffee the other week. He just tells the truth, and they listen because he's been where they are. Michael retired last year, and now we spend our mornings hiking, our afternoons reading, and our evenings cooking overly complicated meals that leave the kitchen looking like a war zone. Every Friday, Ethan and Olivia come over for dinner. We always end up playing board games after. Monopoly's a favorite. Ethan's still competitive, but in a fun, goofy way. Watching him and Michael go at it over imaginary property deals might be my favorite part of the week. And sometimes, when I'm rinsing dishes or putting away leftovers, I think about my 16-year-old self, crying in her bedroom, convinced that Ethan Caldwell was right, that she'd be alone and invisible forever. I wish I could go back and tell her the truth. That one day, Ethan Caldwell would be standing in her kitchen, arguing about Boardwalk while his wife helped load the dishwasher and plan their next family trip to Italy. That the same boy who once tried to define her worth would someday introduce her with pride in his voice. This is my stepmom, Emily. She's incredible. That sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who unknowingly help us uncover the strength we never knew we had. And that Ethan Caldwell was wrong about almost everything. Except for one thing. I would not be forgotten. I would be remembered. I would be loved. And I would be part of a family, messy, beautiful, real. A family that, somehow, impossibly, included Ethan Caldwell himself.